Hey everyone, welcome to the Ceres Podcast. I'm your co-host for today, Stelios, the founder and director of Ceres. Joining me is my very good friend, David Miller from Millers in Haxby for our masterclass interview series. In these episodes, we explore advanced frying techniques to elevate your skills. David and I will break down the operational side of running a successful fish and chip shop. We'll cover essential training and development topics to help you enhance your business. Our masterclass isn't meant to replace traditional training programs. Instead, it's here to complement them and showcase the valuable work they do in our industry. Think of it as a deep dive into technical aspects of the industry with two industry insiders. In today's masterclass interview episode, we talk to Terry Jones from Meijer Potato. Terry is a seasoned professional. I love that word, seasoned. Ooh, seasoned. He's a seasoned professional in the potato industry. He brings over 30 years of experience to our podcast episode. At 52 years old, he resides in North Shropshire and has dedicated his career to advancing the potato sector. Terry began his journey as an operative in a factory manager in the fresh pre-pack industry, supplying retailers. In 2007, he seized the opportunity to transition into ware and seed crop management and sales by joining Meijer-owned subsidiary. Since 2015, he's been serving as the UK sales manager for Meijer Potato UK. Outside of his professional life, Terry is passionate about spending quality time with his family, attending live music events, supporting Shrewsbury Town, because as he says, somebody has to, and tending to his allotment where he also grows his own potatoes. And yes, I missed the opportunity to ask him which ones he uses at home, but I forgot. Meijer Potato UK is a subsidiary of Meijer Potato BV, a Netherlands-based company still owned by the Meijer family. Founded in 1920, Meijer Potato has over a century of history and has specialised in seed potato breeding for nearly half of that time. The company boasts physical sites in Netherlands, UK, France, Spain, Poland, Turkey and the United States of America. And its varieties are active in over 60 countries worldwide, spanning all sectors of the potato industry. Meijer Potato UK operates under the motto, everyone deserves to enjoy food, supported by core values of trust, awareness, innovation, focus and enjoyment. These values foster a close-knit team relationship across all Meijer sites, and facilitate the rapid introduction of new potato varieties to the market. The spirit of collaboration and direct relationships with UK growers are what Terry believes set Meijer Potato apart in the industry. There was a lot to say there, and I've got man flu, so I think I did really well. We're really eager to hear from you. Feel free to share your thoughts and suggestions in the Ceres Podcast discussion group. We know that's a mouthful, but it's on Facebook and it's easy to find. We aim to keep our episodes engaging and informative whilst tackling industry topics. Today's episode is brought to you by Ceres Predust No. 2, the game changer in pre-dusts. Imagine achieving perfection in every bite of your battered fish, and now it's possible. Why choose Predust No. 2? Our formulation maximises fry-in-all life, and you can say goodbye to inconsistent batter coverage. The Ceres Predust's unique texture guarantees superior adhesion for that perfect crisp every time. And with our inside-out seasoning approach, you season the fish without ruining the batter texture. Each sealed bag of Ceres Predust No. 2 is free from hidden nasties, artificial colours and artificial preservatives. It's allergen free to boot. Proudly manufactured in the UK, we ensure the highest standards for your peace of mind. Don't take our word for it. Here's a 5-star review from our website. I can't work without this Predust. It's really made my life so much simpler. Previously, other rice flours or cones didn't hit the spot. This does just as it says. The little bags really do help keep the product in best condition. Boost your sales and profits today with Ceres. Order your Ceres Predust No. 2 from ceres.shop now with free delivery across mainland UK. Stay connected with us on social media, but by subscribing to our mailing list through our episode show notes link, you will get the best news, the podcasts up front, all our news articles, and you'll get special offers. And you only get special offers in your inbox, nowhere else. We don't want those annoying people spamming everybody on Facebook saying, hey, you've won this competition, give us your credit card details, because we'd never ask for that. If you win something, we don't need your credit card details. So join our mailing list. Now, let's dive into today's masterclass with David Miller and me interviewing Terry from Meijer Potato. Enjoy this episode.
Hi everybody, we're here on another pod masterclass and we've got Terry Jones, a seed grower. Now you heard us banging on about seed growers for quite a few episodes now, and as you know, me and Stelios know nothing about it. So we've brought this great man on to tell us all about it and sort of put these questions to bed really about what seed growing is. Terry, welcome.
Hi, nice to see you both.
Great stuff. Just give us a bit of backstory, Terry, on your how you become a seed grower and where everything about it.
Just to firstly say, I'm not specifically a seed grower myself. We have a lot of growers that produce seed for us, but I work for a company called Meijer Potato. We are the UK branch of Meijer. But we're a Dutch-owned company, and we are variety breeders rather than growers. So we have our facilities and a process that we can talk about today that breed varieties, and then we develop them, bring them to the market, and then we engage with a pool of fantastic growers across the UK who then actually grow the crop for us to then be able to market. And that's specifically where I come in my role as the UK sales manager for Meijer Potato. But obviously all of that involvement and experience gives me lots of knowledge across the whole of the process that I'm happy to be here today to share. To talk about myself a little, I'm based in North Shropshire, work here from home with my wife and 3 children. I've had 30 years in the potato industry now, coming out of a number of years actually working in architect's practice, trained to be a technician, and was made redundant and didn't want to sit around doing nothing, so saw jobs advertised at a potato factory that had just opened near home, and went to work there for a little bit of time and worked my way up from the ranks, through the ranks. So from sweeping the floor on the first day, I was factory manager within a couple of years, was there for around 10 years until the factory closed. And then had opportunity to move into the sort of field work and sales side of things, which was swiftly followed by an opportunity to get involved in the seed potato side of the industry. There was a new company set up in 2007, which was called Potato Innovations, and a number of us joined that to set up a dedicated seed potato sales operation, and we represented a number of different breeders of varieties, but we were always 100% owned by Meijer Potato, who were a Dutch breeder. And 9 years ago, Meijer made the decision to just concentrate on marketing our own portfolio of varieties. And that was around the same time that I stepped up to become UK sales manager. So that's that's the story of 30 years in potatoes for me,
brilliant.
anyway.
That's brilliant. That's great, Terry. So I think you've listened to a few of the podcasts, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
So my saying of the year is, I don't know if you know Cockerels at all, or John Bones.
We do a lot of business with Cockerels. I don't know John specifically, but we do deal with the guys at Cockerels a lot.
He was such a relaxed man. He was sat there having his Hell's Bells can of ale, wasn't he? And just chatting away. And we asked him about seeds, and he just went...
Just water in the afternoon,
There was a slight pause, and he went... Well, I've been doing it 20 years, mate, and it's a dark art. So that made us think, what is this all about? So please, that's why we're here today, to really discover what it's about.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't quite go as far as dark arts. I mean, we're breeders, and we all have our own portfolios of breeding material and our own varieties. So whilst... as an industry, once a variety is established and named, anyone can use that variety for crossing purposes when they're trying to breed a new variety. But there'll be a certain amount of commercial sensitivity in terms of what you're doing on variety development. But at the end of the day, we're all here to work together. We have a portfolio of varieties. There are a number of other breeders in the UK and the Netherlands and Germany that have some excellent varieties as well, and none of us have got the answer for every part of the sector, because it is such a varied sector with the different processes, but also the different preferences from one country to another, from one region to another. We all know in the fish and chip industry that there'll be areas that will prefer a yellow flesh potato, others that will prefer a white, a drier one, a softer chip. So between us all, we do our best to find all the different solutions, but it is extremely varied.
Yeah, so starting at the beginning, how does it start? How does it start with the seed manufacturing? How does it? Is that the right word? How does it seed?
Yeah,
how does that seed start?
The initial process would start in a breeding station. We have our Meijer breeding station in the southwest of the Netherlands in Rilland, where our head office is, and we basically start with the crossing process. All potatoes are bred from a crossing of two different varieties. Of course, before we start crossing, we're looking at a target market of the variety that we're trying to find. For instance, if we were trying to find a chipping potato variety, we wouldn't necessarily cross a crisping variety with a salad variety. Occasionally, it can throw up a surprise, and you find something that does work. But you usually look at the existing mother and father variety, so to speak, and look at the qualities that they have, but then also look at the potential negatives that those varieties have, and try and find something that could go with it. And when you cross them together, you hopefully find a variety that has the best of both combined. In terms of the actual process itself, it takes place in a secure, sealed, sterile glass house. We grow our parent stocks, as we call them. They're generally grown on either stones or on metal plates, because what you want for the crossing is the pollen and the berries from the plants rather than the potatoes. So you want to grow as much foliage as you can. So if you put the initial potato on the stone, then that will not throw too many roots, and it won't throw seed potatoes. So what you get is sort of a 7-8 foot tall plant, and that will give you lots of flowers. Those flowers are then, just by hand, will be cross-pollinated, and you then wait for the berries. The flower on a potato plant will turn into a berry, and within that berry will be maybe 150, 200 seeds. It just looks like a little baby tomato. those berries are then harvested at the end of the season. We dry them out, and those individual seeds from the berries are planted. Actually, indoors we have climate chambers at our breeding station. We will just have modules with all the seeds individually planted. And you've got to remember that from that berry, even though you've got the same mother and the same father, every single seed within those berries is a completely different variety. They may all have similarities, but there will be differences in all of them. So what you're looking to do is just find the best plant from those crossings. Within the climate chamber, those plants are grown for around 3 weeks until we have just a small plant, maybe 2 or 3 inches high, with a couple of leaves. This next stage it's a big step forward on what we've done in previous years. Previously, those plants would have been taken and cut by hand, but we take the modules and they go onto a conveyor, and we have a robot arm. And the robot will identify where the leaves are, and it will laser cut a part of that leaf and then put it into a test tube along with some solution, and it'll do that for every single plant that's in that module. And in total we will be maybe 900,000 of those plants every year, so it's a huge amount of material. Once we've got that solution with the leaf in, then it goes away to our lab, and we are testing that solution and looking to identify DNA markers. Within our breeding station we have the markers for certain defects, certain qualities, certain characteristics identified. And when we do the DNA test, it's just like a PCR test. Obviously, these days everyone knows what a PCR test is. And we do that test, and we look to identify the DNA strands within that variety. That tells us instantly whether a variety may have resistance to eelworm or resistance to blight, or may have a certain dry matter that you're looking to achieve. And at that point, you can throw away 95% of those plants. So it's a high wastage level, but that technology allows us to obviously take a very good pool of breeding material forward.
Wow.
I appreciate that's quite a lot of information, and that's only the first stage. That's only the first 3 weeks of the process.
So whereas years ago, I guess, you wouldn't discard all of those, you'd have to grow them to the maybe a next stage before.
Absolutely. This is where the strike rate in terms of finding better and improved varieties can change with this sort of technology that you're absolutely right, Stelios, that you would have had to plant these varieties out and look at them and then decide in the field whether they look half promising or not, and take them forward, and maybe take them forward again, and maybe once more, and then find out that the blight resistance that you thought you might have had isn't there. So it really allows us to push more seedlings through the process, and then what you come up with is a much stronger pool of material. Once we've done that, we then go on to the next stage of the process, which is taking those plants that we want to go forward. We put them into one of our glass houses, and we then grow them on until we have a potato plant, and we will have a few potato tubers on the plant. We then harvest those tubers within the glass house, just a handful of them, and the following year we will then start that process of putting them out into the field. We'll probably just plant one, and then we will keep one or two in reserve, just in case there's a problem in the field, and we don't want to lose everything we've got. So then that puts us into the first sort of full year of outdoor planting. That summer, the guys from the breeding station, and it's an interesting process. Myself and colleagues have been over just to see what they do. When those plants are at the right size, we then have a machine that can go through the field and harvest all of those plants individually again. That's a step forward from having to hand plant all those individually. So we just run the harvester through, and then you get 30 or 40,000 completely different varieties all laid out on the ground in the field. The guys from the breeding station will then walk through those plants one by one, and they will look at every single plant. And again, the vast majority, you can see, probably aren't that good. We would only take 5 or 10% of those forward from this stage. But the plants that they like the look of the tubers, we usually put a little bag on the floor by them, and it gets stamped with a number, and then they will put 5 or 6 tubers in that bag, and it will be picked up later on, and that will go into the cold store, ready for planting the following year. So you can see from that first sort of 15 to 18 months of the process, we've already filtered from 800,000 or 900,000 different varieties, probably down to around 2,000 or so now.
Wow. It sounds like at this stage, these two early stages, it sounds like there's a lot of manual handling, a lot of labour, and also a lot of wastage.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I never quite considered this. I just assumed that, again, we knew nothing about how this works. And I think for the most part, we're just learning from just getting our potatoes delivered to shops. But I sort of assumed that there was an easy, foolproof way to just keep having the same variety made time after time. So why is it not that easy to just have Lady Jane just recreated every year? What is it that I don't understand, because I've never done this before?
No. It is just those differences in that breeding process when we'll get on to seed production, and varieties do kind of slightly mutate. We have to make sure we have the right multiplication material at the start of the seed production process, which we get to a few years down the line. But yeah, it's important that that we're looking to filter out. There'll be a number of varieties that may do a job that would be equivalent to something like Lady Jane, but when you're breeding, you're looking to find something that's actually an improvement. What's the point in breeding a new variety if it's not going to be a step up on what you've got already, if it doesn't add value to the seed producer, to the ware grower, to the end user, to the consumer? Everybody's got to win, or it's not worth doing.
The people that work in the seed houses, Terry, are they scientists or they've done a degree in agriculture or
Yeah, they'll be highly trained personnel. Our head of breeding has 40 years plus of experience in potato breeding, so is fully up to speed with the process, with looking for the best crosses, with identifying candidate varieties that could work, and the whole team in the breeding station again have similar experience, that they've been doing this for a lot of years. And we do bring people in. We're obviously always keen to work with the next generation. So the breeding station do work with universities in the Netherlands, and bring people in to work in the breeding station, but also share information back with the university, so that we have the next generation of plant breeders ready and waiting.
So. God, my head's hurting already, and we're about 4 minutes in. So technically, although a variety has the name, well, firstly, how many years would it take from the first process to the final process, so before you then sell it on to become a potato? So that's my first question.
Yeah, it varies a little bit. How quickly you can multiply a variety before you bring it to the commercial world is part of that. We are trying now to get a variety to a commercial named stage in around 6, 7, 8 years. Okay. Not so long ago, that would have been 10 years or more.
Okay. So
well, Lady Jane, for instance, that was at first a seedling in 2010. So it's only really the last 2 or 3 years that we're bringing that through commercially.
So I was going to use Lady Jane as an example then. So perfect. So so we're on third generation of Lady Jane now. Is that right? Give or take.
In terms of our commercial multiplication, we're just bringing through field generation 4 material.
Okay. So
yeah.
Are there differences between 4 and 1? Is my question. Because if that's the case, the name has stayed the same, but there's been changes, if that makes sense.
The name will still stay the same. We go through the breeding process that we've just described.
Yeah.
And once we've gone through that first couple of years of just looking at varieties within the breeding station, it's still a numbered variety. We build up a stock, and we build enough stock to take it to. Initially, there is a trial against heat in usually Spain, where we will take all the varieties out and see what can cope with the drought and 40-degree heat. At that point, we usually then take all of those results along with trials on different soil types, and there will be decisions made after around 4 years as to whether we take a variety forward or not. And then depending on the level of confidence that you've got on the variety, it will either come out to wider trials all across the Meijer sites across Europe and further afield, and be tested for a year or two before they make a decision to commercially multiply it and name it. Sometimes you can see at year 4 that a variety, well, this one's going to be a winner. So we're going to push on. We're going to start commercially producing mini tubers and high-grade seed in the background while we're still going through the testing process. Because if you put a variety out into the market and you find it's an absolute blockbuster, and then you've got to tell someone, well, yeah, it's great that you love that variety, we'll see you in 3 years for some seed, it's not what you want to be doing. Yeah. So that's the risk element in what we're doing. But generally, depending on your level of confidence, it's around 6, 7 years now for variety development.
Have you ever had it where you thought you had a blockbuster and then it was an absolute lemon?
Many times.
Oh, okay.
They don't all make it.
Yeah.
And we do get extremely invested as well. You know, it's almost like having a child. You know, you nurture it through all the years and seeing it grow and develop, and you build your own confidence in it, and then you get it to commercial level, and it doesn't always work. You don't find that niche in the market. You're up against difficult years of climate, and a variety doesn't stand up as well as you expect it to. So whilst you've got all those years of testing, it's relatively small-scale work in the early years, and until you get those commercial blocks out there and get lots of feedback from lots of end users, it doesn't always work. And we all personally have varieties where you have faith in them, and you want to push on, but you sometimes have to get to the stage and say, no, it's not going to work, so we'll call it quits.
So one thing I've been thinking about is, so this process, although it's become, from what I can tell from what you're talking about, it's more efficient, it's better, probably been available for the last 100, 150 years, give or take. What would potato growing been like in the 1600s, 1500s? Like, would it have just been you grow potatoes, save some behind, replant those ones? Like garlic,
that would be about it. They were just the initial plants were just wildings, weren't they? You know, it was you were really sort of into the 1800s, I think, before sort of proper commercial production of potatoes would have taken place. But breeding would have been fairly primitive. Again, just observations by the eye, and if something doesn't work and it's an absolute disaster, well, you've got to go down a different route. And these days, with the volume of what we're doing, with the level of investment in those varieties, you obviously can't afford to do that. So you need to use the technology that you've got available to filter through the material you've got, and hopefully improve the strike rate of when you get a variety to its commercial status. It transfers from being a seedling number to a registered name. You want most of those to work and put some revenue back into the breeding station.
Well, because I think it's fair to say that the world collectively grows more potatoes successfully today than they've ever done, without having any mishaps or famines like in the olden days. And that's obviously down to breeding technology and obviously selection and the whole process that companies like yourselves are doing. And you mentioned something important, that needs to be essentially sold as profit to reinvest back into the breeding houses and so on. So I guess a lot of our listeners might be listening to this thinking, well, the farmers are doing us over. And the farmers are probably listening to this thinking the seed houses are doing us over. Like, everyone probably thinks the next person down the line is doing them over. Whereas actually, the story, when we're talking to each person in their profession, sounds very similar, which is we're all putting back into the beginning of their process to make it better. That sounds quite popular.
Quality. The best quality we can get,
Yeah. And there's a strong demand to deal with the challenges that we're facing with the extremes from one year to the next in terms of climate. The last 2 years, from a seed point of view, we've had 2022, which was red hot, and seeds burned to a crisp in the sun, and the yields were poor. And then last year we had a difficult spring, delayed planting on some crops, a reasonable summer, in terms of not too much extreme, but then an incredibly wet autumn, where harvest of seed was extremely difficult, caused some issues, and in some cases wasn't possible, and seed never got harvested. And you're talking 4 or 5 years of investment to get to that point of harvest and selling something, and you've nothing to sell.
I think one thing, as Stel says, over the people we've interviewed, the weather has come up a lot of how that plays a factor in what crop we get that year.
Yeah.
Are you, as seed houses, actually developing crops that can withstand these extreme weather now? And now looking at that, how can we?
Yeah.
Because I heard you say you take them to Spain to see how they cope with heat. But obviously, in the UK, we've got extreme weathers, and it has been very wet, late planting or late getting it out of the ground. And as you know, last year they couldn't even get them out of the ground. It was that bad. So, my question is, are you looking at products or seeds to be able to cope with the way the weather's changing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of water is never good for potatoes. They're a variety, a plant, that doesn't root particularly well sometimes, especially in wet conditions. We've seen a lot after the wet spring. If we go into fields now, that they haven't always got a particularly good root structure. So they don't cope well with wet conditions, and those wet conditions will also act as a start for other diseases as well. If you combine warm and wet conditions, then humidity equals blight, and blight is a challenge for growers right here as we speak. Blackleg and soft rot when potato seeds are sitting in poor wet conditions are also a massive problem as well. And breeding can help to give resistances to take away some of those problems. But we're also trying to breed varieties that help you work around the difficult growing seasons. For instance, we'll go back to Lady Jane again. It's a main crop variety, but it's not a particularly late main crop variety. We had some trials of Lady Jane in the eastern counties last year. It was particularly wet, and I went to visit a field in the middle of September, and there was Lady Jane that by that point, when it was still dry, the plants were mature, the test showed that the yield was right, the dry matter was right, so the fry was going to be right, and you could go in, and if it had been a field full of Lady Jane, you'd have gone in and harvested it, and it would have been a good, safe harvest. The rest of the field was another variety, which is a later maturing variety. It was still stood there in the field, 4 feet high, plants as green as grass, not the maturity in the potato under the ground either. So the field needed to be left for more maturity for another month, and then it rained, and that field was harvested exceptionally late in poor conditions, and to my knowledge everything had to be moved straight off the field because it wasn't suitable for storage. So if we find varieties that have a shorter growing season, then you're not under pressure in the spring to plant the variety because it's wet, and you've got maturity of the variety at the end, that if it's ready in August and September, the likelihood is that you can harvest that before conditions work against you.
It's really interesting, though. And it is becoming a problem, and it's good to hear that the varieties are coming that will cope with that. To keep that main crop going, because that is our we're on new season now, as we all know. That's a short period, but it's the main crop we need to survive through the rest of the year as a fish and chip industry. So and maturity in the variety in the autumn, and then allowing yourself a window for safe, clean harvest is absolutely key as to whether the best variety in the world. When you've got those conditions against you, you've got a high risk that crop will not store particularly well. If you've got damage at harvest, you're going to see rots and breakdown. You're going to see higher levels of work in chip shops if someone's taking a raw sample in and they've got to deal with slices or cuts in the tubers. And if a crop is going into store with a high level of soil, then you're not going to get that ventilation through the boxes or through the bulk store that give you that stability and the airflow that holds back the dormancy break and the sprouting in the spring as well. So it's so important just to have the right variety that gives you that safe harvest. So as farmers are a business, because that is what we try to stress to people, that they're a business and they need to make money to survive. Do you think that a lot of farmers will now say they've been growing the varieties we know, and I'm not going to name any because I don't want to start saying this isn't bad or whatever. Do you think a lot of them will start actually looking towards this shorter growth time to maturity, rather than going to the names that we all know that it's always been about?
No, they're definitely looking for variety selection. They've got to be sure of a market for it, of course. If a variety's got a short season but doesn't make the product, then it's not going to make it either. But if there's something that a grower can be harvesting safely and with better quality, but still getting a viable yield, then they're going to consider that strongly. The differences in harvest costs. There's a saying in agriculture in terms of harvesting that a week in September is like a month in October. You have shorter days. You're likely to have poorer conditions, and as that window closes and the days get shorter, and your window of opportunity for harvesting diminishes, then your costs will go up in the opposite direction. So. It's absolutely key. From a seed point of view, we have to be even earlier. From a seed variety point of view, we really want to be finished by September. October, November lifting is always a challenge.
How do you come up with the name then for the variety?
Every company has.
They have somebody who comes up with names.
We all have our ideas, and then they usually go to the big boss in Holland, and if he likes them, then we might have a chance. But every company has their own themes. There's a company out there that uses destinations for their variety names. With Meijer, we have two threads. You'll have picked up on Lady Jane, we have Lady Anna, we have Lady Terra. So if it's a chipping or a crisping variety, then it's called Lady something. We've just named a new crisping variety, Lady Avalon, and I was lucky enough to be the one who came up with the name. So that's my little badge of honour for the year. Whereas in our packing and our salad range of potatoes, then they all have a musical theme. And we have melody, we have orchestra, we have jazzy, acoustic, all sorts of things. So every company's got its own idea of coming up with a name that will then, obviously, if something's Lady something, people naturally associate, it's a Meijer variety. Yeah. So every company has their own ideas. Interesting. And we have to, when we're putting a name forward, then we have to take it to the authorities to get it registered. Once a variety is registered, you have plant breeders' rights for 30 years, but they also do check the name to make sure that it's not too similar to an already existing variety. I've forgotten the name now. We had a candidate for a variety name in the spring, and it went to the authorities, and they said no, it was too similar to something else, so we couldn't use it.
And where are the authorities? Where are they based?
It depends on where you're breeding. I mean, obviously we're a Dutch breeder, so NAC is the breeding authority in the Netherlands. So a variety would need to go forward as an application to them with the name, with the characteristics. They will look at the variety, they will test it, they will make sure that it is sufficiently different from an existing variety. There have been instances in the past where a variety has come forward, and once it's been looked at, it's been realised that, well, actually, it's too similar to an existing variety, so we're not going to let you register that. So it has to be distinct.
So all that work that you've talked about, you can think you're onto a blockbuster. You take it to the powers that be.
Yeah.
And they go, no, I'm sorry. You can't.
They're saying, no, actually, yeah.
Well, you just have to choose a new name, though, wouldn't you?
They'll still be able to look at the DNA and tell that it's
DNA.
It's known as DUS testing. So a new variety has to be distinct. It has to be uniform. That if you're growing a field full of it, they're not wildly different. And it also has to be stable as well, that it's not going to sort of mutate into something completely different in 2 years' time. So DUS testing is the big process that any variety holder has to go forward with.
I'm sorry, Terry, you say this isn't a dark art.
So one of the questions I had, and this is breaking down a few of these processes, but from the initial breeding...
Yeah.
How many seeds can a plant make, and then how many potato seeds does a seed make?
It does vary from one variety to another. You may not be surprised
to average
to hear.
Then, just as a guide.
An average is probably 12, around 12. But we have varieties that will only produce us half a dozen tubers on a plant, and others that will give us 15 or 20.
Okay. It's interesting, isn't it? So that one seed will create that many, roughly. It's very...
it's mind-blowing, isn't it?
Well, it's a big influence on the multiplication process as well, because if you've got a variety that only gives you those 6 tubers, and you replant them, and those 6 are obviously 36 the next year, and those 36 are 192, 200 or so the following year. So that's 200 or so after 3 years. Whereas if you've got a variety that gives you 15, then that 15 is going to be 225 after year 2, and around 3,500 after year 3. So you can multiply varieties a lot quicker, and there's potentially more yield in the area as well for the grower. But it's also a good thing for the grower and for the end user, because if you can multiply that variety quickly and get it to a point where it's commercially viable to sell, then you're sending younger seed with fewer field generations out to the grower, so you get a healthier plant, and a healthier plant equals a healthier, better crop for the end user. So when you're looking at a new variety, if that variety clearly isn't going to give you many seeds per plant, then that's a huge negative, because seed production becomes incredibly difficult.
And again, you guys have to be sort of ruthless about this. If it doesn't hit a certain figure, you've just got to discard, because there's no point anybody carrying on with that process, because if it's not going to have the right yield for you, it's definitely not going to have the right yield for the farmer. And
sometimes it's hard when you've got a variety that's good quality with a lot of attributes, but if it doesn't yield, then it doesn't work. A cord, you'll know, as an early season chipper, that's a difficult seed variety to grow. In some areas where land doesn't generate many seeds per plant, it's very difficult to get yield from it. It's one of those that if that was coming to you as a new variety now rather than 20 years ago, for all the positives that you have with the cord, you may say, we're not going forward with it because it just doesn't give us enough seed yield to be viable.
Have we got to the point in British farming, or just farming in general, where we're testing the soil and saying, well, actually, we've tested the soil, this is the seed you need for this soil, or are we just not there yet? Because in my mind, it sort of makes sense. If I ring someone up like you and say, here's my land, I've had it tested, here's the report, and then you could say, well, actually, here's what we have that we think would work perfectly well with that. Or am I just...
No, that's a fairly well-established principle. If a farmer's got a certain soil type, here at home in Shropshire, the bulk of the land is quite sandy ground, free draining. It's, despite the risk of late frosts that we have here, it can be quite early ground, because that free draining soil will get heat into it quicker, so you can grow quite an early crop. Hence, there would be lots of accord grown for early chipping, premier for processing, various other things. But that sandy land is quite abrasive, so you're not going to get a skin finish on it. So growing for packing in this part of the world is quite rare, whereas you would maybe go down to Herefordshire or over onto silts in Lincolnshire, where you've got a siltier soil that's a little bit wetter, that wouldn't necessarily be so early, but you will get that skin finish that the pre-pack trade are absolutely obsessed with. If a variety doesn't sparkle on the shelf, then they're not going to stock it. Soil type's absolutely key to certain varieties and certain sectors.
I don't know about you, David, but I'm sort of regretting not taking much notice in biology and geography at school, because...
Well, all I can say is the quietest you've ever been on a podcast. So
my brain's just turning over all the information.
So we've got the seed, and then... So it takes 7 years. So obviously, then you bring it over to grow it with, say, a farmer. How many years would you grow that? And because obviously 1 year to the next is going to be different, isn't it, when you grow it? And then how long after that then would you go, right, guys, this is here for sale, come and buy it?
Yeah. Generally, around 5 years, the process starts that you get that variety registered. you go through your DUS testing, so everything's sorted, and we want to produce some seed. So we would go to SASA, who are the main scientists for potatoes in Scotland, and we would give them some clonal stocks. So these would be plants of varieties that they would hold that are absolutely true to type, and they would cultivate some microplants from the clones. Our mini tuber producers, and we have a number of mini tuber producers, then they take those microplants, and in their own lab facilities they will take cuttings and they will grow plantlets, and the plantlets are then planted out within their facility, which is usually a greenhouse or a polytunnel, again completely enclosed with availability of sterile soil, sterile water, so a very high food safe environment. And they will grow those mini tubers throughout the growing season. Mini tubers are generally, so as they sound, maybe 25 to 35 millimetre diameter, so quite a small seed tuber. And once they've got those stocks, then we will allocate those mini tubers to our high grade growers. And the initial grades of seed potatoes are known as pre-basic, and then PB1 is the first generation, PB2 the next, and so on. So those high grade growers, we will put those mini tubers to the growers that we want, and they will grow them usually twice. Most growers will do a PB1 grade, keep everything that they've grown, and then put it back in the ground the next year. That first year is quite small quantities. You put mini tubers, you put around 60,000 mini tubers on per hectare of land. So it's quite high input, and it's high cost. That's sort of £40,000 or so per hectare that we're investing in those high grade plants. So we have 2 years of multiplication with PB growers, and they are generally in low risk areas in terms of plant health. So the Black Isle in Scotland is a key area for pre-basic production. Legally, PB seed has to be grown on land that hasn't had potatoes on it for at least 10 years. So there's always a lot of pressure on finding clean ground, and areas like the Black Isle also have lower risks in terms of aphids as well. So risks from viruses being transmitted from one area to the other are lower in those areas as well. So that would be the first 2 to 3 years when you include the mini tuber process. We then do field generation 3 and field generation 4 multiplication. That would be with more commercial size growers, so they would be growing bigger field areas. Obviously, as you multiply up from that mini tuber to PB1s to 2s to 3s and so on, the quantities are getting bigger and bigger. So you would move down into other areas in either further south in Scotland, or Yorkshire is a big area for seed production, and other areas too. As a company, we have quite a broad spread of our grower base, just to manage risk. If you have a climate incident in one area or the other, then you're not losing everything that you're producing. So we're then taking those plants through to field generation 4, and then we have something that we can sell. So this is where the cost comes. You think about that investment in the breeding and the breeding station and the trialling, the mini tuber production, and then the commercial production. You're probably talking an entire chain of around 8, 9, 10 years before you get paid.
And people play hell about paying $5.50 for a bag of 25 kilo bag, Stel?
Well, hope. I think those days are gone, but I know what you mean.
I do, yeah, but you know where I'm coming from, Terry. That's the perception, unfortunately.
I was in our local shop at the week.
Yeah, that's what we got. I think that's one thing I took away from Johnny's when we were talking about it. And we were talking about the price we're paying now.
Yeah.
And he more or less said, well, that's really what you should be paying. You know? He said it was, you're about there, really. That's what you should be paying for a top quality potato.
To get a variety out of the breeding station and then start commercially multiplying, again, still that process before you get paid. It's the breeding station tell us it's around 4.5 to 5 million euros per variety.
So obviously the more seedlings you can make, or the more potato seeds you can make from that process, that you guys are laughing to some degree. But if it all goes to plan.
If everything goes to plan.
Yeah. And as we know in agriculture, not everything goes to plan. It's better than it was, but it's not as perfect as it could be.
There's been a huge investment in technology with seed producers, with farmers to try and make things better, but they all come at a cost. I know John was talking about sort of costs of harvesters near £1 million, a planter and tractor set up at $500,000. So it's real money, and it's got to be paid for somehow.
What's always impressed me is that when there's any sort of investment or new technology, it often comes out of Holland. And I've noticed this. Anything to do with agriculture, whether it's flowers, potatoes, any form of growing, why is that? What is it in your experience? You've been working with Meijer for these years. What is it that you've seen that they do differently over there?
I think the farmers, a lot of the farms are quite close farms, family farms, and out of a need, they've developed their skills. And you go onto farms and you see sort of great engineering, things that have been done, things that have been made on farms just by a farmer and his son or his daughter or whatever. And I think those skills have developed then into industries and businesses that have then taken those products out commercially. So,
do you think that their government over there may be, and this isn't to get into our day-to-day politics, but more of a broad vision? Do you think maybe their government post-World War II has just invested in those sort of farming practices in agriculture?
Well, there was a lot of development in agriculture, obviously with the formation of the polders as well, which happened around that time, where huge amounts of land were reclaimed from the sea, were desalinated, and then they created an incredible template for farmers to go on to brand new land that was incredibly fertile. The crops that the guys grow in Holland, are fantastic. They've got superb soil and great resources. They've done what they've needed to do to make the most of that resource, I think.
I'm also quite interested in the fact that it's a decentralised process when it comes to growing the seed, that you guys take it to a certain point, and then you've got, master growers or trusted growers or professional growers, however you call it. How does somebody, how do you differentiate a seed, a farm that's suitable for seed growing over someone who's just buying it to make ware potatoes? What are you looking at there?
I think all potato farmers will have a good level of professionalism, but seed growers have just got to have that extra care and attention that they're out in the fields constantly, just looking to make sure that plant health is the very best that it can be. They have to make specific investments as well in things like drying walls when the seed is harvested in the autumn. It obviously comes out of soil, which can quite often be wet soil, and with seed, to get that stability in the store, it's absolutely key that we get that seed dry and the skin cured before we put it into the cold store. And again, it has to be a high quality, low temperature cold store to keep that seed nice and quiet to stop it from sprouting too early before it's planted the next year. So there's big investment from those growers, and I guess if they haven't got that level of professionalism, then it's going to be dead money. They've got to do everything they can to make that investment pay.
And I guess they're reporting back to you how it's growing and figures and so on.
We will monitor our crops in the main. We what we grow as a company, we're selling ourselves, whether that be direct to a farmer or whether it be to a merchant who's then supplying a factory, or whether it's sometimes to a factory themselves, and they will then place the seed with their growers. So we're, even though other people are growing the seed, we're hugely invested in that growing process. Like I said, I'm manager of the sales team. We have a production team as well who monitor these crops all the way through the season. They're all out and about there today. I think there are two in Scotland and one further south in England who are in fields all day, monitoring all of those individual stocks of all the different varieties, of all the different grades, and recording that information. It goes onto an app that we've got, and we all get an email, so we get 30 or 40 emails every day that tell us what's happening with those seed crops, what the quality is, anything that we need to look out for, and that helps us build a pool of information that we obviously monitor when the crop's actually harvested as well, just to make sure that the quality's absolutely right, and that what those farmers have grown, we can then target into the right market for the following year, whether the plant health is suitable for us to multiply it for another generation, or whether it's something that we say that's now at a level where we will sell that seed. And sometimes we'll look at something and say that's not of the quality that we want, and it'll get disposed of. So it's a very involved process still from our point of view.
Yeah, no, it sounds
a lot of care there, isn't there? A hell of a
lot. Absolutely. So we really do get invested in the varieties and in having the right quality, and we've got some fantastic growers, and it's important that we keep relationships with those good seed growers to be part of that investment as well.
So could somebody, let's say I wanted to buy some Lady Jane seed, but I wanted to grow it in Cyprus, for argument's sake, that wouldn't be possible, I take it, because you guys are going to say, well, that seed's not available, well, it won't work in that environment, etc., etc. You'd have to use this other 5 or something. So I think my general question is, would seed in the UK be mainly grown for seed in the UK?
From our point of view, yes. In terms of the wider production, no, there is a lot of seed. I did have some numbers here. The total seed industry would be around 13,500 to 14,000 hectares grown every year. So that includes Scotland and England and Wales. They're managed from a regulation point of view separately. There are 2 different government bodies that manage those seeds. But that would produce around 400,000 tonnes of seed every year. At least a third of that will go for export, mainly from Scotland. There are varieties that it's a question I'm asked quite often by farmers that will look at the register of the seed that is produced, and there are some varieties that they'll look at that register and say, well, what on earth's that? I've never heard of that one, or I thought we'd stopped growing that in the UK years ago. But the seed is still grown for export markets. Egypt would be a key market, and they take varieties such as Cara and Hermes that aren't grown in any great volume in the UK now, but both of those varieties are quite heat tolerant, so there's still a strong market for those seeds in Egypt. and because of the health that the seed industry can give over here, high quality seed from Scotland, then they want that seed grown in those areas to then export.
Interesting. That is.
Yeah.
So
in terms of Europe, obviously we're not able to send seed to Europe now, and vice versa. So whereas there would have been a proportion of seed grown in the UK for Europe, that's not happening anymore.
But Meijer's there anyway in Europe, so they can deal with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, Meijer will be responsible for serving the European market.
I tell you what's displeased me somewhat though, Terry, which is fairly annoying, and I'm always the negative one, as David will say, is that you've come on and dispelled this myth that the seed turns up and farmers get it for cheap and then off they go. Like it does. You've sort of enlightened us to how tricky it is on that side. And I know it's not quite a dark art, like you say, the science behind that. I know what John meant by that, because to him it probably is dark art, and to us it's even more than that,
Look,
so,
I spoke at the start about having 10 years working in a factory and packing potatoes for one of the big multiples day in, day out. And then came out of that factory, and then you realise that you don't know a huge amount about potatoes until you get in the field, and then you find out how the seed is produced, and then how the variety is bred. So yeah, you've got to be involved right at the sharp end of that process to have that knowledge.
What's at the top of the list in terms of solving? Is it dealing with drought or blight or too much water, or making sure that the potatoes don't need too much spraying? Because again, these are all things that affect. What do you think is at the top of the list, or are they all just things that you're constantly juggling?
It is a constant juggling act. What you're looking to do, there are varieties out there that will solve the issues with blight as they stand. As we speak, there's a new strain of blight that's active in Europe that we're hoping it doesn't find its way to the UK, but the likelihood is that it will. And we'll have to reevaluate how blight resistant the existing varieties are. So you're looking at movable situations in terms of disease. You're looking at soil that is farmed sometimes quite intensively on a 4 to 5 year rotation for ware production, and so you're trying to deal with what that does to soil. That it creates problems with eelworm in seed, so you want to find resistant varieties with other nematodes in seed, and you want to find varieties that are a little more resistant against things like rhizotonia that give you stem canker and ugly tubers and black scurf on tubers. But then you're also looking to find solutions that are dealing with that changeable climate that can cope with heat, that can maybe cope with the wetter season to some extent, although it's difficult, but also try and protect yourself by finding those varieties that have a shorter growing season, that if you're growing in that concentrated period of the summer where the risks are a little bit lower, you're more likely to get the result that you want. So it really is a combination of all those different things, and there are varieties that will have solutions to maybe one or two of those things, and the key part of this breeding process that we're involved in is trying to stack those benefits into a variety that maybe solves 4 or 5 issues rather than 1 or 2. Our head of breeding always tells us that it's 50-something, there are 50-odd different characteristics or defects with a potato. And he always says, don't ask me to find a variety that solves all of those, because it won't happen. But if you can find something that maybe deals with a third of those or half of those, and then you put that variety in the right environment that maybe takes care of a few others, then you could be heading in the right direction. But it's not easy, and it takes time.
So my last thought process is that Meijer they've got very traditional breeding practices with lots of modern technology, but they've stuck to the traditions as such. The EU and probably the UK to some degree now. I know we're out with Brexit and everything, but
Sure.
they've probably made things harder over the years. We can't do GM, and for whatever reasons, whether we agree or not.
Yeah.
So there's lots of other new technologies coming. But do you think that maybe our government, so let's say that we'll use the EU because that's where Meijer is, and the British government over here, do you think that they're probably a bit too slow on the uptake, so you guys can then breed a bit faster using different technologies, or do you think that they've got the right pace?
I think the breeders are driving the technology because it's in their interests to use the resources that they can find or develop themselves to come up with the solutions. Obviously, food safety is a big part of any government, whether it's EU or GB. They've got to make sure that their population have food to eat. Some might argue that perhaps it doesn't sit high enough on the list of priorities, but yes, steps are being taken. But yeah, the breeders are looking for solutions for the farmers, without a doubt. Without sort of governments driving them to do it. It's in their interests to do it anyway.
What? Quite an odd question. I mean, and I got this book on the top 20 potatoes, and it was like doing all the breeding. You guys came up a lot, and there was other breeders in Netherlands as well.
Sure.
What is the biggest selling seed from your company in the UK at the moment? Then, what variety is that?
It's a close race at the moment. 10 years ago, it would have been a crisping variety called Lady Rosetta, which is an early season variety that is purely for crisp production, very early maturity and bulk, good dry matter, which is a key characteristic that the crisp factories are looking for. The sugars, when you're using Lady Rosetta off the field, are quite stable. So it's been a very popular variety for us, and that's quite an old variety. That's almost 40 years old now, Lady Rosetta. Yeah. So it's actually a free market variety now. But we still sell an awful lot ourselves. Our up and coming variety is a salad variety called Jazzy, and probably Jazzy and Lady Rosetta are about neck and neck at the moment. But I think in the next year or two, I think Jazzy will just overtake it and be number one.
And what chipping varieties do you? Obviously, Lady Jane. Do you have any others?
Yeah, well, Accord is the one that's been well established for sort of 15 or 20 years now in that early season market. We have Lady Anna, that's been around for 5 or 6 years as a main crop, long-term storage variety with good eelworm resistance and fantastic taste. That's the key. We have varieties that solve issues for farmers, and it's been great to see more and more over the last 10 or 15 years that breeders are looking more and more at taste rather than yield, and farmers are understanding that as well, that rather than just a variety that looks great and gives you 30 tonnes an acre but doesn't taste fantastic, they understand that the end market really is more discerning than it used to be, and
it's
really looks hard at taste now.
Yeah, it's so key now, and I think so many expect so much from the products they buy. And in our game, when it's just 10 years ago, 15, just a bag of chips. Well, it's not now. It's
no, not anymore.
It's changed, and people, can. It's a marriage. We need chips. It's the biggest seller in a fish and chip shop.
Yeah.
So they need to stand up on their own and actually go, they're great.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what they pay, whether they pay £2, £3, £3.50. That, to me, it is important because we need to make profit just like the farmers do. But
and you want them coming back, don't you?
They were fantastic.
Yeah, you don't go back if you've had a bad bag of chips. You don't go back, do you? So it is absolutely key. And Lady Anna's a nice tasting variety, and again we've bred things into it that give advantages to producers. That it's a very low waste variety. It's a variety that's got a shallow eye, that's got quite thin skin. Certainly when it's used in factories, it's around 10% more efficient than other varieties. So, look, obviously, peeling and peeling waste is becoming a huge issue in shops going forward, and as legislation develops, it's going to become even more of a problem. And something like Lady Anna that can be rumbled in 30 seconds, and you've got an absolute minimum of waste is great. Or if you've gone down the fresh prep route, then again, those fresh prep producers will get the same benefit of an efficient conversion of raw product into finished.
I don't think I've ever tried Lady Anna yet. I mean, because obviously I used to do my own Terry, but now I get mine produced for me from as pre-prepped. They work a lot with the Isle of Ely, so we're buying from around that area and those farms.
Sure.
As yet, I've not tried that, but I might ring Paul up and say, "Can you get me some of these and let's have a look at them?" Because obviously, this is how you learn, don't you? By, and I think that's the only drawback for me is that that's all I'm. What Paul buys in is what I'm using. I trust he's very good at what he does. I can't shift around like you could if I was doing it myself and say, "Can you get hold of these or whatever?"
And historically, word of mouth has been a lot of how varieties have developed. That they're good, and the merchant will tell a few other shops if he's got a few more available, try these. People have been doing very well with them. But this is where we say Lady Jane has been the first variety where we've really tried to engage more with the fresh industry, whether that's been through advertising. Chippy Chat magazine, we're regular advertisers now. The last 2 or 3 years, we've started to do a few of the shows, the sort of Fry It and the Colbeck's shows, and they've been great experiences because we're getting so much out of it as well. But it's been really useful to take these products, because they are our products, to the shows and get the feedback. The first show we did, we took 3 varieties there, and we had a hell of a day. Lady Jane was like, "Wow, this is amazing." 1 or 2 people ate it, and it was like, "Well, I'm coming to have some more of those." And then that just sows the seed, quite literally. That the last couple of shows we've done, we've focused solely on Lady Jane. We've got plans for the coming year now. We're just getting to a commercial level of seed availability. There'll be more grown next year, so we have plans with a few shop visits lined up where we'll go to some shops, take some Lady Jane. Hopefully they enjoy it, and we can share some experience with them, and hopefully get some good feedback. It's so important. Again, I know we've spoken quite at length about this process, and hopefully you guys understand the length of that process and the cost of that process. And if we do all that, and then a chip shop owner or a number of chip shop owners say, "Well, it doesn't work for us," then it's not only the financial side of it, we've invested a huge amount of time in something that doesn't work.
And reputation, I suppose, because there's a bit there, isn't there, as well?
Indeed, yeah.
One last thought before we end this one. Do you ever see technology in agriculture and farming producing a better early potato?
We're trying.
Yeah, because I think that's one thing that the main crops, for the most part, have significantly improved over the years. But what's the challenges in the early potato? What is it that I don't understand between the differences?
I guess there are 2 key things with early potatoes. The first thing is that to get an early potato, you have to plant it early.
Okay.
And we've spoken about planting into later windows where soil temperatures are warmer, soil's perhaps not so wet and horrible. So those early producers, they will be planting seeds in sometimes January in outlying areas in Cornwall where the risks are a little bit lower, but generally for early accord, February, early March planting. So from that point, they're in the ground and they're fully exposed to those conditions. We had frosts as late as May this year. We obviously had wet conditions, and it's difficult for those crops to grow when the soil and the weather is doing what it is. So that has an impact on the quality at the end. You can take steps like pre-sprouting, chitting your potatoes, just to try and encourage them through. If you put a sprout on a seed potato before you plant it, then it's going to come through the ground a lot quicker, and obviously not sit in those poor wet conditions and be exposed to disease. So that's the first thing. The second thing with the new potato crop is that it's harvested green top, straight off the field, usually with the absolute minimum of killing. Sometimes growers will go through and flail that crop a few days before, maybe a week, just to try and get the skins to set a little bit. But in this period, late June, early July, the bulk of it, there will be a flail on the front of the tractor as they're going through with the harvester, and then it will be straight up the harvester and into the bag with a loose, fluffy skin, generally in a hot time of the year, with immaturity, still not a fully mature potato. So you've got all those things that are absolutely ripe for breakdown. Hence, all your merchants will say that your shelf life on that new potato is probably only going to be a day or two. You've really got to keep on top of your stock. So those are all the things that create challenges. Whereas, as you say, you get into August, September, that potato's got a bit more of a skin on it, and it will sit for a bit longer and not deteriorate.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's another interesting one. It's just another interesting one, yeah. Yeah, because again, like we've seen lots of advances in main crop, but it always seems like the earlies are the most when people are just not the happiest. And but yeah, totally understandable.
Especially in a hot summer, when soil temperatures are high, then you with the best will in the world, sometimes growers will irrigate just before harvest just to try and bring the temperature down, but if you're bringing all that heat in the potato straight into a bag, straight into a chip shop where it will possibly sit ambient in a warm environment, then that's where the trouble can occur.
I guess this is why... Sorry, David, go ahead, mate.
Sorry, I think for me, as an operator, I know your family are new were, but for me, it's only a very short period in the window of the fish and chips.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's school holidays, so the trade goes up a bit, but that again comes down to communication with your customers, saying we're on new crop now, because they'll go, these chips are a bit soggy or whatever, and if you try and brief your staff on why this happens, and you can relay that to the customer, they sort of understand it. But then you've got people who love them, who love the taste of them, who love that.
Absolutely.
That soggy, the soggy thing that holds the vinegar and all that. They love all that taste. Where it's just, if it's wrapped too long, it'll just become a mush. So there's no pleasing anybody.
No. I was in our village shop at the weekend and always have a little bit of potato chit chat as we like to. Well, I like to. I don't know whether she does or not. But I said, "Are you on new season?" "Yes, we're on some accord." And yeah, how much? "Oh, £19 a bag." I said, "Yeah, that's about right on the trade." And I said, "How are they doing?" "Oh, yeah." I said, "They're frying absolutely lovely." She said, "The worst thing is though, my kids absolutely love them, so they're eating all the profits."
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's funny, and then some people don't, but that's nature, isn't it? That's the nature of business, I think.
Indeed.
Yeah. Really grateful for this, and really grateful for Austin for putting us together.
No, that's great. A pleasure.
Terry, would probably love to have you on again in the future, because I think
I think you will.
Yeah, you will be.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good for us to just try go back as far as we can. I don't think we can go back any further than you guys, though. I'm not so sure. Is there someone else? I don't know. Maybe so. God. But we're trying. We're trying to fill all the gaps. But if you ever think of anybody that we should be talking to, maybe me and David should fly over, Terry, to Holland and have a look at what's really...
I think we should.
And,
I think we should.
But no, I just think...
Well, I know
for us, it's just a learning process.
Yeah, no, indeed, and you guys will be more than welcome. I know Austin and Andrew Crook are both very keen for a repeat visit. We had them over, I think they've been over twice now, actually. They came over in November for a breeding station visit. November is our big kind of show time where all of that harvest is put out to display, and we show customers what's coming through. We look at the selections ourselves and make decisions as to which ones we take forward. So it's quite interesting from a breeding station point of view, but obviously there's nothing happening in the field. So I think it was the following summer they both did come over, and every 2 or 3 years we have like a technical conference event where we have a few key speakers, and then we take people around the trial fields and show them that process of what we've produced in the breeding station, to then walk through the fields and look at what's out there. And you never know, you might be the one that points your finger at that blockbuster variety out of the 900,000, and you get to name it or something like that.
Really brilliant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh well, I can't thank you enough, Terry. I think it's been it really has been interesting, and
No, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, and I hope you've enjoyed it yourself as well.
Oh, absolutely have. Yeah.
Brilliant.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Bye now.
Cheers.